Good evening, afternoon, or whenever you watch this. It's me, Omar. I am back with John of the Big Northeast Pod with our collaboration looking at the three Northeastern Bowls and, of course, bowl scenarios later on in the season. A lot happened this week in the Northeastern Bowl scene, but before we begin with that, John, do you have any opening statements, anything to say?
Just glad to be here, man. Another beautiful day, another great week of college football. So yeah, glad to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. This feels a lot like 2007, honestly, with a lot of big upsets this past week again with Oregon and everything. Oregon was the biggest one. Shoot, there had to be a few others too. I don't know if you consider Cincinnati Notre Dame an upset, but I'm sure some people do.
I did not, but yeah, traditionally, I guess you would say it's an upset, but this year, I think the well, if you're not talking to Notre Dame fans, then I would say that the better team won. But it seems like a lot of Notre Dame fans thought that they should have won that if Kelly had started what's the kid's name? Pine, I think is the
Oh yeah, Drew Pine, yeah.
the he was the second or third string quarterback or whatever that they think that should start, but no, it didn't happen. So yeah, we'll say it was the proper ending to the game.
Yeah, no, I agree. Not much of an upset there, but speaking of upsets, a team we'll talk about later, Temple upset Memphis. Huge win for that program, something I didn't expect. I definitely bet I thought Memphis was going to cover easily against Temple, but I was proven very wrong. But before we get to them later on the pod, let's look at some of these bowl projections, starting off with the Military Bowl on December 27th out in Annapolis, Maryland. Really a wide range of matchups here and a lot to discuss. So we have Virginia, Houston, Louisville, Utah, which is a very interesting one, which we'll get to more later on. SMU, Pitt, Virginia, UCF, Houston, Louisville, and Louisville, Memphis. Those are the range of matchups there. Uh, I want to ask first, and something that we'll see in the Fenway Bowl is: do you think that the American lacks depth in elite teams, really? Because the American tends to put their best teams in bowls against Power Five squads, and that's something that Mike Oresco has been trying to do with the Power Six sort of model, where they're trying to stick it to the man. It doesn't matter if it's a 6-6 Boston College team in the 2020 Birmingham Bowl. If they beat them, it's a landmark win for the conference. So this year, there's kind of like a mix and match of who's playing the Power Five schools. So do you see that this is a sign of more parity in the American or a lack of elite teams?
Seems like a wealth disparity in the American this year. We've got obviously Cincinnati we talked about at probably a college football playoff team. If they win out, I think they probably make it, depending on who else is in the mix there at the end. So that's one team that's not going to be in any of these bowls for sure. And then you have SMU, who's also sitting there at 5-0 and is a ranked team this year. Some of the advanced metrics I like to use Sagrin have them as a top 20 team. But then after that, you don't really have any ACC or AAC teams until you get to Houston. And I think Sagrin again had them about 63 or something like that. So you've got 40 teams in between the second and the third best team in the AAC. So yeah, I think there's still some good teams. It's not like completely atypical for the AAC. I just think that you have a bigger wealth disparity this year than we've seen in past years.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think when you point to like the great schools in the American, you look at UCF and Memphis, along with I wouldn't even say Houston. Houston seemed like a or 1 or 2 year wonder, but yeah, you have a UCF, Memphis, and then Cincinnati. UCF is right now sitting at 3 losses or 2 or 3 losses, but they just lost to Navy. Which that was a Navy team that a lot of people thought might only win 1 or 2 games, which I still think that's in the forecast for them, but it's still a setback for UCF. And then Memphis losing to Temple. So I do think there is a bit of a disparity, like you say. And the good thing about the American is it seems to be cyclical because, it was Houston that was a big dog in 2015 and 2016. Then it was UCF. Then it was like Memphis for a year. And then now it's Cincinnati. So it seems to be cyclical. And it might even be even more cyclical after Cincinnati, UCF, and I forget who the third school is. Oh, Houston lead for
Houston,
the
yep.
Big 12. Yeah, so there might be even more parity there. But I thought that was an interesting thing to see there. Another interesting thing to notice about those projections was the Sporting News having Utah coming all the way to Annapolis. To play against Louisville. So that would entail the American giving up that tie-in, because there's not really many teams geographically that would align with that bowl. Do you see that happening? I think that's highly unlikely that they would give up the bowl tie-in just because it's a Power 5 opponent, but I see the logic there.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Utah is certainly a team that travels well. They love their football out in in the great state of Utah, and I guess if there were no better options for them, I mean, that's a team that playing in the Pac-12, I'm not really sure what to make of them yet. They've had a bit of quarterback controversy there. Cameron Rising is now the starter, who was the starter the first couple weeks of the season. Charlie Brewer got benched, left the program. So now Cam Rising, they beat Oregon State, I believe it was, this past weekend. And Rising had, I don't know, like 130, 150 yards through the air, not like an amazing game. But, I think they'll probably be bowl eligible. It's anybody's guess out in the Pac-12. It seems like anybody can beat anybody in any given week. So, I mean, you could do worse as a draw. But yeah, I don't see them coming across the country and playing in Annapolis or most other places that, for that matter, that aren't maybe Florida or somewhere nice and sunny and warm in late December or January.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally agree with that. It could be just them trying to be creative with their bowl projections. I don't know. What I do think would happen if the American gives up that tie-in is I can see a 5-7 team taking that spot on APR, academic progress rating. CBS had a projected 10 teams that with 5-7 records going to bowls, which I don't think it'll be that many, but I think we'll have at least one or two, because there's 84 bowl eligible teams needed for bowls this year. That's way too much. I think the highest we've ever had in a season is like 81 or 82. So I do believe we're going to fall short, especially in a season like this where so many teams are just kind of like cannibalizing themselves, really, like in their conferences.
Yeah.
I can totally see it happening, or 5-7 team goes to Annapolis if the American doesn't send a team.
I'm going to throw out a different take on this one, Omar. I think that every FBS team should have a bowl game. I've thought this for a while. I mean, I can see the argument against it, but to me, it's just like, hey, it's another month of practice. It's an opportunity for these kids to get better, to go somewhere that maybe they've never gotten to go, play a team that they'll have never played and maybe will never play again, and get a little exposure, throw something up on TV. People don't have to watch the bowl games if they don't want to. If it's going to be UConn versus I don't know who's the worst team that they don't have already on their record. I don't know, some whoever the worst team in the Mountain West is, say, if that's the game, like, you don't have to watch it if you don't want to, and if you're a UConn fan, then you can watch it. That's my take.
No, I love bowls. The more the merrier. In fact, I did a podcast with my close friend Marshall on our pod. We talked about FCS bowl games because during the pandemic season in the fall, with not many FCS schools playing, you had Eastern Kentucky creating the Opportunity Bowl in the town of Richmond, Kentucky, and they invited Western Carolina, called it a bowl game. Both teams, I think, had losing records in the fall. But it was a cool concept. I mean, it was sponsored by the local board of commerce and everything. And that's what bowls are really about: local commerce and just bringing the fans in from different fan bases. So I agree with that. But of course, the NCAA, the no fun NCAA would of course block that and everything. Especially, you can't let the athletes have reap in as much of the rewards of NIL. I mean, now that happens, like, I guess they have to cap it, just being the NCAA. So, but I'm with you on that one. The more bowls, the merrier.
Right on. We'll make our business case to the NCAA. Once they figure out they can mean a little bit more green, they'll probably come around.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, speaking of green, I think that's a great segue to the Fenway Bowl, Green Monster and everything.
Right on.
So those projections are also all over the place. Some new teams entering this week. ECU and BC being a matchup. Yeah, of course you see Louisville, Memphis, BC, UCF, BC, Memphis, Miami, and Memphis is a ESPN projection, and Virginia Tech and Temple is another projection. So those are two new matchups this week. Focusing in on those last two, what do you think the odds are that the ACC sends Miami all the way up to Boston? Because Miami is still somewhat of a brand name. Um, I gotta believe that the whole aura of the U has worn off in the span of 20 years since their last national title, but who knows? Temple makes a lot of sense. I think that might be the best geographical option for the American in that bowl game. So, want to know your thoughts on those two matchups?
Yeah, I mean, either one really. Yeah, taking Miami first. Yeah, obviously it's a big brand. If BC isn't the draw, then the ACC could certainly send Miami. I certainly don't see why not. I know the the U has been down a little bit, but for the Fenway Bowl's first ever bowl game, I mean that would be probably like their dream scenario, I would imagine. Um, and then going to what was it? Did we say ECU or what was the what was
Yeah,
the
we
other one
can
you
talk.
went?
We can talk
Oh,
ECU. ECU's a bit of a interesting one too. I mean, they don't strike me as sort of an elite program in the American right now to play an ACC school, but I mean they're on a bit of a hot streak.
okay. Oh, you had said Temple. My bad. Well, let's talk about them both real quick. ECU, I like. They have a kind of a funky play style in that I was looking up the stats. Their leading tackler is actually a cornerback, who I think is probably their best player. Um, Goes by the name of Jaquan McMillan. Also leads the nation in interceptions as well as passes defended. So if this kid's not a Jim Thorpe award watch list member, he should be, because he's got the best stats of any DB in college football. So I'd like to see him get a chance to play up north in the Fenway Bowl. And Temple, yeah, I mean, I thought like this time last week we were talking about them. I thought, they're probably not even going to be bowl eligible. But then they come out and they get the comeback win over Memphis. Huge. They were down 17-0 at one point, I believe it was.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so great win for them. Dewan Mathis, I believe is the quarterback's name. He's the story there. I think he threw for 330 and 3 touchdowns, no picks in that game, added another 50 plus yards on the ground. So I mean, if he's on, obviously he's got the ability to beat just about anybody on the schedule. So I took a look at the rest of their slate. They play Cincinnati this week, so that's a loss. But everybody else on the schedule, they don't play SMU. Everybody else is, I mean, Temple won't be favored in those games, but they have a chance against anybody else. So regionally, it's not a bad draw for the Fenway Bowl. They could do worse than that.
I agree. I mean, I think it is the best option now. Temple fans, as in like, do they draw well? I mean, probably not. They probably do not travel well. Just look at Lincoln Financial on any weekend. But yeah, I think that this is an upcoming team. They should get to 6, I believe. I kind of don't know what to make of Navy anymore. The 3 wins I would have had for them would be USF, Tulsa, and Navy, with maybe East Carolina being a 7th win or so. But absolutely great performance by the team. Dewan Mathis, great quarterback. Tavon Ruley running the ball very well for that Temple team as well. So many options too. And East Carolina, I think that things are starting to come together for Mike Houston, especially on offense with Holton Ahlers. Finally, 4th-year junior, seems like he's been there for even longer, doing great things out there in Greenville. Should be interesting for sure. Speaking of BC, I want to ask, like, do you see? I would think that the Fenway Bowl would be lower on the ACC's sort of totem pole. There's no select order, but who knows what happens in these conference back rooms with these bowl negotiations. I would think that maybe an 8-4 or 9-3 BC ends up going to the Sun Bowl, because I don't see there being many 8-9 win teams in the Sun Bowl. Plus, BC has that extra advantage of never even appearing in the Sun Bowl ever. Do you see something like that happening, or are they pretty locked into either the Fenway or the Pinstripe Bowl?
I mean, that's a good question. The ACC is so wide open this year. I have no idea who's gonna take it and how the order of teams are going to go. And I think you're going to have a fair amount of fairly interchangeable teams that are in bowl eligibility there, all at around probably the same level. You know, you probably have 3, 4, 5 teams that will all be like borderline top 25 teams that will be in that same mix, and Clemson might be one of them. So Clemson, Wake Forest, BC, whoever else ends up stepping up. Obviously, NC State, maybe one or two other teams that we're going to have there. To me, are all so interchangeable. I think you might see. I guess it depends on connections at this point. If there are some administrators at BC, or if there's people at the Fenway Bowl that kind of know each other, can pull little strings, I think you might see BC there for the inaugural Fenway Bowl. If not, and people don't really care about it, then maybe you're talking Sun Bowl. But obviously, if BC ends up being maybe the second team in the ACC, then that might be a different story. But if it's they're all just kind of in the mix there at bowl eligibility and nothing more, then I think we're talking Fenway Bowl as a possibility for BC.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think they're locked in, but I do think the Sun Bowl would be a possibility for BC. I'm trying to think who else has not appeared. I don't think Wake has ever had an appearance in the Sun Bowl either, so that could be an option too. I mean, Wake is implicated in the last bowl we talked about, the Pinstripe Bowl too as well. And it's just also amazing too, because the ACC's bowl times are just so far. It's just so remote from the conference's location. Like, well, some of them are at least. You have the Holiday Bowl now. You have the Las Vegas Bowl in alternating years, so those do alternate, and then the Sun Bowl, as we mentioned. So it's just interesting. Like, you can literally send anyone into those bowls as well. I mean, I'd like to think that Clemson would be a prime team for the Duke's Mayonnaise Bowl because they're in the Carolinas. But then again, like we just mentioned, the Sun Bowl and the Holiday Bowl. Like, why not send Clemson to one of those bowls? Because when is that going to happen again for those? So a lot of possibilities there. A lot of things that go into play for the Fenway Bowl. It's not just, hey, let's stick BC or Syracuse in Fenway. So very, very interesting implications there. So moving on to our final bowl, the Pinstripe Bowl. These matchups are pretty much 2004 conferences galore, really. I mean, you got Pitt, Rutgers, Maryland, NC State, Maryland, Virginia Tech, Maryland, Pitt, Rutgers, BC. A couple shockers as well. You got BC and Indiana being placed in this bowl for whatever reason. You have Wake versus Rutgers, and this last one's a shocker for me. Pitt versus Minnesota. So it's all over the place. But first, I guess discussing this, I think this bowl is either Maryland or Rutgers is to appear in or not appear in, just depending on what happens with their season. What do you think the odds are of each team becoming bowl eligible? Maryland, I think they still become bowl eligible, even despite their ugly performance on Friday night. Same thing with Rutgers, but I feel like it's either one or the other with those schools.
Yeah, I mean, we said it last week that it was going to be a big test for both of these schools. I think we were talking a little bit more about Maryland, but irregardless, both schools kind of failed that test miserably. I don't think we were expecting them to come anywhere close to winning against either Ohio State or Iowa, but a nice showing, at least somewhat competitive, would have really gone a long way. I think you're right. I think that both of these schools do still get bowl eligible. Has there ever been a division like the Big Ten East that has sent every single team to bowl eligibility?
I think in 2014 the SEC East came close because Kentucky finished 5-7, and if they were bowl eligible, there would have been 13 out of 14 bowl eligible teams in the SEC that year. So I think they're the closest one, but I don't think it's ever happened before.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in years past there were much smaller conferences, right? So if there were divisions, maybe it was only 5 teams or whatever. So, but yeah, in a 7-team division, I don't know. Maybe it's never happened, but it really could happen this year where every single team goes to a bowl. So, I think Maryland and Rutgers are both good enough to do so. I think they'll probably eke out their wins against the Big Ten West, and maybe they'll cannibalize each other a little bit. Maryland will beat Rutgers or vice versa, and somebody will take down Indiana, and kind of somebody will pull an upset against Michigan State or Penn State or Michigan or whomever. So it's certainly possible. I would love to see Maryland versus one of the old ACC guard. That would be kind of my dream for the Pinstripe Bowl. But if it's not them, then like Pitt Rutgers or something like that, an old Big East matchup would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting your point saying that the whole division can be bowl eligible, because the way I see it, I feel like on Thanksgiving weekend, Maryland Rutgers will be pretty much a bowl eligibility playoff in my opinion, because looking at Rutgers' remaining schedule, I think they'll get their fifth win against their fifth or fourth and fifth wins, excuse me, against Northwestern and Illinois. But I don't know if they beat Wisconsin head to head. I'll have to see more. I still kind of believe that Wisconsin would be the better team there. We'll have to see as the season goes on. But if not, they could be heading in with a 5-5 record because they play Indiana. Both teams play Indiana. I don't know what to make of Indiana. I'm not sure what many people do. If many people do know what to make of Indiana. So it's the same thing with Maryland too. I see them maybe getting their fifth win against Minnesota, but I don't know if they beat Indiana for a sixth win in the middle of the year. So I feel like it's either one or the other, in my opinion. That's the way I see it playing out. But who's to say that one of these schools doesn't pull an upset? Because Michigan they've looked vulnerable at times too, whether it be against Nebraska a couple weeks ago or even this past week with Bailey Zappi actually like absolutely throwing the ball across the field for Western Kentucky against Michigan State. So who's to say? But for me, I think it's one or the other. Interestingly, like I guess USA Today sees neither school being bowl eligible because they have Minnesota in that spot, which I think it's interesting. I'm not sure if they travel well. I mean, Minnesota's been sent out to some pretty remote bowl spots in the past. In the last bowl cycle, they got sent out to the 2016 Holiday Bowl, and that was the bowl game where the team threatened to boycott the game, where Minnesota threatened to boycott the game after I forget what it was. I think one of the players got suspended for like a sexual assault or something like that. But really, really tenuous times. Like, yeah, it was really interesting like week period where like the team threatened to boycott the game, ended up beating Washington State. That game drew 48,000 at Old Qualcomm, so I guess they do travel well, so it kind of does make sense. Um, but still kind of strange.
Yeah, I don't even know how to follow that up. That's
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's
hey
what I
man,
remember.
yeah, it doesn't ring a bell, but I'm sure that all happened.
Yeah, I can link you an article on that one, for sure. But yeah, no, it's interesting for sure. I would love to see Kenny Pickett probably play his last game at Yankee Stadium. Kenny Pickett, I think, is probably one of the most draft-ready quarterbacks. I don't do much draft projections, but with the amount of experience he has and the tangibles and mobility and everything, I think Kenny Pickett is primed for a solid NFL career. But I'm not a draft analyst, so Pickett in New York City would be a huge draw in my opinion.
I don't know. I'm glad you mentioned Pickett here. I wanted to bring up, which I should have mentioned to you before, my bad, but I wanted to bring up, what do you think the odds are of Kenny Pickett, dark horse Heisman candidate here, not winning, but do you think that he can get at least an invite to New York for that Heisman ceremony? Maybe in the top 4 or 5.
I'll have to look at their schedule. I think it's possible. I think it's possible that very possible that Pitt ends up with a one loss total, maybe two. I mean, they might triple along the way in conference play. If they get highly ranked, end up winning the ACC even, I think key games for him in the Heisman for that Heisman possibility would be, of course, against Clemson, which is luckily at home on the 23rd, and against Sam Howell on a Thursday night. So if he balls out against Sam Howell on a Thursday night, also at home, which is great for Pittsburgh, then I say maybe. I think the sort of paradigm for Pittsburgh is, oh, this team runs the ball, like they run the heck out of the ball. So like that's just not true this year. I mean, Pickett has 19 touchdowns already. I think that kind of trips him up. Like the whole I mean, shoot, their coaches, yeah, is it yeah, their coach is Narduzzi. Yeah. Narduzzi with that Wisconsin pedigree. A lot of people think, oh, they two back offenses and everything, but um I'd say it's possible, but right now I feel like in terms of candidacy, I think you got Matt Corral. Like my finals, like Matt Corral, Bryce Young, maybe Kenneth Walker out of Michigan State. As for like the fourth guy, like they could just cut it off at three, which I hate when the Heisman does that. Um, but yeah, I think it's legitimate, honestly.
Mhm.
I mean, long answer short.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pickett playing in the ACC and it being so wide open this year, there's a chance that Pitt gets to 9 or 10 wins and Pickett just keeps throwing haymakers, if he's putting up numbers like he did against Georgia Tech. I think they got the stats here: 389 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions, another 21 yards on the ground. So if he keeps doing that in ACC play and they get a fair amount of wins, I mean, he kind of almost has to be invited, right? Or at least in the conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I think all that hinges too on I think Sam Hartman in a funny way too, how he does in the Atlantic Division, and if they end up meeting up in Charlotte on the first weekend of December for the ACC title game, I guess who outplays who. I think that would also play another factor in it too, because that's actually another guy that I had in my top five, Sam Hartman. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. It'll be interesting because I don't like I like Kenny Pickett. I never would have thought him to be a Heisman caliber or Heisman finalist caliber quarterback, but this year he's doing great. Honestly, it's amazing to see.
Yeah, and I think we are saying the ACC will benefit him. We're talking about Matt Corral. I think him playing in the SEC, obviously, some of those stats are gonna get diminished just by this caliber of those defenses. So I think the scheduling becomes a big part of it.
Yeah, I mean, and also too, I forgot to mention when I said Matt Corral, he might even be like off the top five after what happened this past weekend. Phenomenal performances throughout the beginning of the year, but I mean, that was against like Tulane. Forget who else. I think there was like FCS school thrown in there as well. But the first test came in. I mean, failed it miserably. Might even be out of the top five despite all the good work he's done. So really, it's like anyone's Heisman at the moment.
Yeah. There's a September Heisman every year, and I think Matt Corral won it. But hey, we'll see who wins at the end of the year.
Yeah, exactly. Always exciting to see. A shameless plug, like tune into hardware with me and Jackson throughout the weeks. We go through that stuff, but love to have you on if you want to talk about Kenny Pickett or Northeastern Heisman candidates too, because shoot, I would have said that Sean Tucker would have been a dark horse too for Syracuse, but the exposure is not
Yeah,
really there. I mean,
yeah, the exposure, and I think maybe he's a year or two away at that point. But I was plugging hard before the season. Phil Drakovic from BC. I thought he was going to do it, but football is a dangerous sport, and unfortunately, it's not going to be his year.
Yeah, I mean, I kept thinking about him watching that Clemson game this weekend. I mean, that game could have easily been BC's if Dracovic played. It feels like 2018 all over again. Honestly, we're like BC could have done so much better if Anthony Brown didn't get hurt. But I mean, I feel like there's like 3 guarantees in life: death, taxes, and Boston College quarterback injuries. Like 2015, they had pretty much the best defense of the decade, in my opinion, but they went through 5 quarterbacks. So there's something in the water out there in Boston.
Yeah, bummer. Oh well, speedy recovery for Phil, and hopefully he it doesn't impact his draft stock.
Yeah, I agreed. And I think on that note, we might draw to a close. John, do you have anything final to say?
No, man, that's it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course. Tune in next week for more Northeastern Bowl talk, and we'll see you next time. Peace, love, and soul, everyone.